Welcome to our Monday Facebook Live. This is our third Facebook Live for our Right Sizing Your Body group. And I just want to say welcome and glad you could join us today. Today's going to be a little bit different than the last two times we've done Facebook Live. Today's going to be more educational. That's my goal, is for you to get some information that you might not have. And I have picked a fairly hot topic, number one, but probably fairly controversial as well. What I'm going to be talking about today is the ketogenic diet. I was going to wait to talk about this for a few weeks for you to get to know me a little bit better, for us to kind of get to know each other better before I brought in something as controversial as keto. But it seems to be what's up for today. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And first of all, I want to say that for any diet that brings in fruits and vegetables, especially vegetables that brings in phytonutrients and is really healthy in that way, so the more vegetables, the better. The better your health is going to be. Usually the more weight you will lose, for reasons that I can talk about another time. So for any diet that brings in more vegetables and fruits, I'm all for it. So what I want to do today is just give you some information that you may not know, because it doesn't get talked about a lot in keto circles. And the reason I want to bring this to your attention is because ketogenic diets really aren't all they're cracked up to be in terms of long-term health. And as you probably know from just being in the group a short time, my goal is healthy longevity. That includes right-sizing your body, that includes weight loss and trimming down, but it also includes eating really good quality food and getting healthy. It's not really my purpose here to get you trim, to get you thin, to get you right sized, and to leave you in a body that doesn't function well, or that doesn't set you up for long-term health and healthy longevity. So what I want for myself, what I want for you, is to live as long as possible in a really awesome, healthy, strong body. And I feel like that ketogenic, and it's not just ketogenic, although I'm going to refer to it as ketogenic because that's kind of the newer version, but it's really any high-fat, low starchy carb diet. There are just inherent problems. And so I want to point those out today, because I feel like if you want to do keto, of course I want you to do keto, but I want you to do it from an informed place. I don't want you to do it from this is a magical solution kind of place, and that there aren't serious health consequences lurking down the road. And that's really what the case is. So many of you might get a little defensive about your keto diet. That's okay. I'm just here to provide information, and then you can do whatever you like with that information. I just want you to be able to make some informed decisions. So I have actually taken notes about the ketogenic diet, and I'll tell you my sources at the end, because I actually spent time putting this together. I know a lot about it, but I wanted you to have really good quality information that's based in science. So I've got notes here. So if it looks like I'm reading notes, it's because I am. And so I've got my notes because I want to get this right for you. I want to provide you with the exact right, accurate information. And that comes from science. So I want to get this right. So Basically, what I said was any diet that brings in vegetables, I'm all for it. Any diet that reduces or eliminates processed food, I'm all for it. And that's what happens with a lot of weight loss in diets is you eliminate processed foods and you lose weight. Why? Because processed foods, one reason is because they have so much sodium. So you reduce your sodium and you lose a lot of water weight that way. Anyways, so and the keto diet is one of those diets that reduces processed foods. The better version of the keto diet. So I'm actually going to put my glasses on so I can actually see my notes to give you better information. So there are some pretty serious health effects from being on a high-fat, moderate to high-protein, low-carb diet. So that's what I want to get to today. Clean keto, there is such a thing as clean keto, and there's such a thing as lazy or dirty keto. Clean keto is so much better than dirty or lazy keto, and keto in general is usually so much better than the standard American diet or the SAD diet. So like I said before, my thoughts on keto is that it's a really good stepping stone to the next step in your weight loss and in your healthy longevity. So I'm not knocking it in terms of that, but it's not the end game. With clean keto, you're still eating animal products, and it's just from better sources. And when I say animal products, what I mean by that is anything with a face or anything that comes from something with a face. So fish is included. Fish has a face. Also, any dairy from any animal, any eggs from any animal. So when I say animal products, I mean anything that has to do with an animal. So unless you are 100% plant-based in your keto, everything I'm about to say applies to you, even if you're clean keto and you're eating cleaner animal products in your diet. If you're 100% plant-based, meaning you're getting your fat from things like whole avocados, whole nuts, whole seeds, whole olives, whole foods, not the oils, okay? Not the processed version, not the oils, then you can reduce the magnitude of what I'm saying by about half, but it still applies to you. So don't think that you're in the clear just because you're plant-based keto. So the double whammy is high fat and animal products. The single whammy is high fat, so plant-based and high fat. The double whammy brings in any animal products, no matter how clean they are. These apply to you. Let's see. So another clarification that I want to make is that all vegetables are classified as carbohydrates. They also contain fat and protein, but their primary macronutrient is carbohydrate. So a diet that is low carb is actually different than a diet that's low starchy carb. So what I'm talking about is low starchy carb, and that's what the keto diet mainly is, but I wanted to make that distinction because it's an important clarification. Finally, everything I'm about to say is based in real science, not junk science, not industry-funded science, but true randomized controlled trials published in peer-reviewed Class A journals. I'm not making any of this up, and nothing is someone's theory. It's all been tested. It's been proven in the using the scientific method. These are not anecdotal instances or anecdotal stories of this particular thing happening. This is science, and they've used the scientific method to come up with all of this. So first of all, what we know is that the body's preferred fuel is glucose. That doesn't go against the ketogenic diet right there. Proponents of ketogenic or proponents of high-fat, low-carb diets will also say the same thing. It's not fat. you can trick the body, and that's what the high-fat, low-carb diets do, is they trick the body into thinking that it's fasting or into thinking that it's starving. If there's no glucose available, so if you're not eating any kind of carbohydrate, starchy carb, whether it's a whole carb or a processed carb, if there's no glucose, what the body actually does as its first step is it converts protein and lean muscle into glucose, and that's what it burns. So you're actually, if you're trying to build muscle while you're on a ketogenic diet or a high-fat, low-carb diet, you're shooting yourself in the foot. And it's actually been shown by science. There was a study that looked at young, healthy CrossFit trainers. Okay, they were doing their CrossFit training, and they put them on, and they were muscular. These were not people just starting CrossFit training. These were people who had been doing it, and they were muscular and they were strong, and there were men and women, and they put them on a high-fat, low-carb diet, and they could not keep muscle mass on their bodies. Because what a ketogenic diet does is it floods the body with fat. It reduces to practically nothing the glucose or the starch coming in that gets converted to glucose and glycogen, and it forces the body to make a choice. What am I going to do now? Well, I'm going to go get the easiest thing to burn is glucose. The easiest thing to do is go get protein. So if you're eating protein, it's going to take that protein and convert it to glucose, because the body can do that. So the body converts protein to glucose for burning, and then the body goes to lean muscle mass and converts that to glucose to burn. That's not what we want to have happen. We don't want to lose lean muscle mass in our attempts to get thin. We want to keep our muscle mass and actually burn fat. So what's been shown is that when you are on a high-fat, low-carb diet, your rate of fat burning actually slows compared to a low-fat diet. So that's not what we want, right? We want to burn that fat, and we want to keep our muscle tone. So a ketogenic or a high-fat, low-carb diet just goes against this. So these athletes can't stay on this type of diet and expect to keep their muscle mass. Another thing is high-fat diets actually increase insulin resistance. And I want to tell you how the body works, because I hear all the time, well, my friend who's doing a ketogenic diet, or my son, or my whoever who's doing a ketogenic diet, actually reduced their insulin medication or their diabetes medication. That's true. It's a Band-Aid. What I want you to know is that's a Band-Aid, because the prediabetes, insulin resistance, diabetes, how that comes about is there's too much there's too much fat in the cell, and sugar can't enter the cell. So let me explain that a little bit more. So the purpose of insulin is to act as a key to open the door to the cell so that glucose can come from the blood into the cell, okay? And then it gets burned as energy. That's our natural process. When there's too much fat inside the cell, it's called intracellular fat. When there's too much fat inside the cell, it jams the lock. So insulin can't unlock the door to get glucose in. Somehow the fat jams the lock. So then you have too much blood sugar in your blood. Your serum blood sugar goes up because insulin isn't working, because there's too much fat in the cell already. Also, free fats in the blood, the more you have free fats in the blood, the lower your insulin, the lower the effectiveness of insulin is. So fat can be either in the blood or in the cell, and it affects insulin's ability to get glucose into the cell to be used as fuel and other things, but primarily fuel. So diabetes, pre-diabetes, and insulin resistance is not just a sugar problem. It's not just a glucose problem. It's actually a fat problem. And with a high-fat diet, what you're doing in a low-carb diet is you're reducing blood sugar, serum blood sugar, you're reducing simply because you're not putting glucose in the body to be burned, to be put in the cell. You still have all the fat in the cell. You still have increasing amounts of free fats in the blood, which isn't good because it makes it sticky and thick, and we don't want thicky, thick blood, right? Sticky, thick blood. There we go. We don't want that. We want our blood to be thin and really shoot through our arteries and veins easily to get to our cells and our capillary beds. And it's actually been shown that you can induce type 2 diabetes in young, healthy men by putting them on a keto diet or putting them on any kind of high-fat, low starchy carb diet, whether it's keto or paleo or on and on, all those, Atkins, etc. So keto fixes some symptoms, but it does not get to the root cause of what's going on. Okay? So when you hear someone say, yeah, I'm on keto, or someone I know is on keto and they got off their diabetes medication, your next thought should be, well, okay, I know how that happened. And as soon as that person eats a piece of bread or something even healthier, like a whole grain or something like that, or beans that have complex carbs that your body needs, as soon as that happens, their blood sugar is going to spike up. It's usually worse than it was to begin with. And they're not taking insulin, they're not taking the diabetes medication anymore, so they don't have that to work in their favor. So let's see, I'm just going through my notes here. So the rate of fat loss on a low-fat diet compared to a high-fat diet, that's what we want to talk about for a couple minutes. The rate of fat loss is slowed by more than half on a high-fat diet. We talked about that a little bit earlier. The body can't keep muscle tissue on the body on a high-fat, low-carb diet because the body's burning protein. It actually converts the protein into glucose and it burns that glucose. That's the preferred method. So your rate of fat loss is slowed by more than half on a high-fat diet because you're burning muscle. You're burning proteins. So some of the risks of high-fat, low-carb: bone fractures increase, an increased risk of kidney stones, constipation. Now, constipation is something that you have right away. Bone fractures and kidney stones happen a little further down the road, but constipation you'll have immediately when you start on this type of diet. And it's because you've reduced the amount of fiber. And fiber is what moves things through your gut. And also you're just changing the balance of your gut flora. So all kinds of health problems are caused by a change in gut flora in this way. And that's a topic for another conversation. It increases your risk of GERD or acid reflux, which increases your risk of esophageal cancer, pain, bleeding, and scarring in that area. Okay, let's see. So for typical keto or lazy or dirty keto, they're also deficient in essential micronutrients. And this has actually been studied and measured. For any animal product that you eat, you get a big dose of saturated fat, which eventually makes it into the colon. And when you get saturated fat into your colon, it can cause all kinds of problems, including colon cancer. And the rate of colon cancer in the US is extremely high. Heart disease also exacerbated or caused by saturated fat. And heart disease is the #1 killer of men and women for years. And why is that? Why haven't we solved that problem yet? It also creates systemic inflammation, which then causes a whole host of other problems. So you get the kind of get the idea there. Low carb diets suffer higher risk of all-cause mortality. Let me say that again. That's super important. Low carb diets suffer higher risk of all-cause mortality. So if you're eating animal products, you increase your risk of heart disease and death substantially, no matter how clean they are. Then let's talk about your brain. Your brain on a keto or a high-fat, low-carb diet. Your brain is an obligate glucose consumer. Well, what does that mean? That means that there is no substitute for your brain. Your brain has to have glucose to function properly. What if it doesn't get glucose, right? So the brain says, liver, give me more glucose. I'm running out up here. And the liver says, okay, here's glucose. Because the brain is a glucose hog, really seriously a glucose hog. It's an energy hog. And we want it to be that way because that gives us proper brain function. So if it's not getting enough glucose, what happens? The liver goes into a panic. The brain is saying more glucose, more glucose, more glucose. And the brain is saying there is no more. Okay, so I've got to go to this lean muscle tissue and convert this protein into glucose and send it to the brain. Again, that's not what we want. And then at some point, the liver starts turning fat into ketones. This is ketogenic. This is ketosis. This is the goal of the ketogenic diet. So what happens in the brain when it has to burn ketones? It's not very happy. It wants to burn glucose. It does really well when it's burning glucose. When it's burning ketones, does it function? Yes. Is it happy? No. Does it function properly? No. And this is why you get headaches. This is why you have brain fog. It's why your brain isn't clicking at its normal rate of speed. It's why you might have memory issues. They've actually done studies to see if ketogenic or high-fat, low-carb diet would help prevent Alzheimer's. And it was a disaster. It actually did the reverse. So it encouraged Alzheimer's to set in sooner. So none of us want that, right? None of us want Alzheimer's to set in sooner than it would otherwise. Let's see. The ketones in a ketogenic diet, when you get into ketosis, the ketones themselves actually create an acidic environment in your body. And the body really wants to be slightly alkaline. It functions best when it's slightly alkaline. All kinds of diseases can crop up in an acidic environment. So the fact that ketosis creates ketones, which are acidic, means that we're going in the wrong direction. We need something alkaline. And yes, when you eat a lot of vegetables, that'll bring the acidness, the acidic environment back into an acid alkaline balance. But the fact that you're actually creating an acid environment on purpose, and then you have to balance that out, it just seems counterintuitive, because acidic environments do not go with healthy longevity or actually short-term health either. The other thing that's been shown over and over again is that LDL cholesterol goes up on a high-fat, low-carb diet, which is exactly the opposite of what you would think would happen, because the liver produces cholesterol according to body mass in response to how much body mass you have. So logically, if you think about it, if you lose weight, you're losing body mass, your liver should be producing less cholesterol. Right? So your cholesterol levels, your absolute cholesterol levels should go down, but that's not what happens. It doesn't matter what size you are. You could be right size. It could be those CrossFit athletes that we talked about before. Your LDL cholesterol goes up. Why is that? Well, one of the reasons is because you've got all that free fat flowing around in your bloodstream. It's sticky, it's thick. And your cholesterol, and plus if you're eating saturated fat, then your cholesterol is just gonna be higher. So there are a couple benefits of keto. So I wanna highlight those really quick. Benefits of keto: if your fat calories are 90% of your diet, which really nobody recommends that, but you can reduce seizures in children, the seizures that don't respond to typical medication. And I didn't start with the history of keto, but historically, keto has been around for almost a century, believe it or not. And it started with a doctor who at the Mayo Clinic was just frustrated because he wasn't getting any kind of results with children who had seizures. There were 30% of them that medication wouldn't touch their seizures. So he came up with this diet, high fat. Let's see what happens. Let's see if their seizures reduce. And they did. So these kids that don't respond, their seizures don't respond to medication, to seizure medication, if you get them on a high fat diet, low carb diet, their seizures will be reduced, or if not eliminated. But what happens also is that these are, these when they put kids on a high fat diet, like up to 90% of their diet is fat, they're hospitalized. So they're doing it under a really critical medical evaluation and a medical eye, because they've got to monitor them. And the goal is to get the response they're looking for and get them off of this diet as soon as possible. It's not a long-term thing, and they've never thought of it as a long-term thing. So that's what it was originally intended for, and it works. It reduces seizures, or it can reduce seizures in children that don't respond to seizure medication. So let's talk a little bit more about some risks. So some side effects of keto. If you know anything about keto, you've heard of the keto flu. And that is everything that you experience when you have the flu, you can experience when you're on keto. So all the headache, the chills, the muscle aches, pretty much the nausea, pretty much everything. And they've actually named it the keto flu. Another side effect is it impairs artery function, and this happens immediately after you eat. Immediately after you eat a fatty meal, whether you're on keto or not, whether you're eating a healthy keto or a clean keto or not, if you eat a high-fat meal, your artery function is impaired. It impairs LDL, as we talked about, and it impairs athletic performance. So earlier on, when we talked about those CrossFit athletes, they lost all that muscle tissue. Guess what? They also lost a lot of their athletic performance, which that was the opposite of what they wanted to have happen, right? And the last thing, which is kind of an annoyance, but it's not really a health issue, is your breath. Because acetone is a ketone. So what you're breathing out is acetone, which smells really bad, and it also tastes really bad. So now let's long-term risks, and then I'll wrap it up. So some of the long-term risks of being on a high-fat, low-carb diet: it increases your risk of dying from all causes. So all-cause mortality is increased by being on a high-fat, low-carb diet. It increases your risk of colon cancer. It increases your toxic load, the toxins in your body. You have a 30% increased risk of birth defects, and your blood flow is worsened. Okay, so those are some more of the long-term risks, as well as some of the ones that we talked about earlier. It increases your risk for heart disease, which is the #1 killer of both men and women in this country still. After all these years, we haven't solved that problem. So that's what I have to say about keto. Again, I'm not trying to convince you not to do keto. What I am trying to do is inform you so that you can make an educated decision for yourself. If you decide that you want to take these risks and get on a keto diet, That's totally fine. Just know what the risks are, because they, as we've talked about for the last, 30 minutes, there are a lot of risks, and not all of them are ones that you want to play around with, really. So I want to give you some of my sources, because I actually went to some sources. All of this stuff is roaming around in my brain, but I wanted to have the actual concrete science behind it before I started talking, because I want you to have that. So there's a video by a woman named Lee Crosby, and she was talking to a medical community. And the title of the video is the ketogenic diet safe? She uses the science. She talks about the science. Another resource is nutritionfacts.org. A couple of books that I feel like are really good. They're very science-based. They're actually pretty dense, but they are readable. One is How Not to Die, and one is How Not to Diet. And they're both by Michael Greger. And they're both good books as well. And all four of those sources have really good information about keto, and it's based in science, which what I'm all about. I want to know the science behind everything, and good quality science, randomized controlled trials, not industry funded science. So that's what I have for you today. I hope this helps you make a good decision for yourself about whether or not you want to try out the keto diet, or if you've tried it out, if it feels like it's the right thing for you. If you feel good on a keto diet, just know that it's probably not the high fat, low carb. It's probably that you're off of processed foods and the standard American diet. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. If you want to talk more about this, private message me. I would love to get on the phone and talk to you more about really what's best for you given your circumstances. Thank you very much.